But now let me take your questions, and what I'll do is probably just kind of work my way around it. I'm going to start with a good friend, Reverend Echols, and Reverend Echols, again, I'm just so glad that you're here. I know you've been through a challenging loss recently, but I'm glad that you're here tonight.
Thank you, Governor. First of all, let me commend you. You brought a sigh of relief to Martinsville by name, saying that Martinsville and Danville will not be closed to BEC office. We commend you for that. This community has suffered a lot. But you mentioned the foster children, and I've served in this community a lot with social service and foster children. We had an organization, the VEFC, the Emergency Foster Care for Children.
Yep.
Like 3 o'clock in the morning, there's some abuse or something with children, and that organization folded. You know, that's something that we need to revisit in terms of children in the Commonwealth, because it was a very vital organization. And I think we need to do some preventive measures other than just probably prisons and this type of thing. So all that we could do as citizens of the Commonwealth, there were parents and there were churches working together for the emergency foster care for children. And I think that we need to do all that we can to revisit that and get that organization maybe at least back on par in terms of our children in the Commonwealth. So
this is an organization I'm pretty familiar with, and it was a unique organization that really looked at emergency foster care needs. So these would be parents who they would sign up and wake me up at 3 in the morning if you need a family for a day or for a weekend. It was a real emergency need that organization tried to suit, but partly because of all these low reimbursement rates for foster parents and some other challenges, they're having a hard time making it go. It might be that the additional funding that the legislature has provided for foster care reimbursement rates, but also for some of the recruitment and training efforts, might be of assistance in helping breathe life back into that organization. And I'd be glad to work with you and others to see whether we can make that happen here in the front row. There's Mike coming your way.
Thank you. Responding to the Virginia Tech shootings, this citizen would love to see Virginia and the governor famous. U.S. Energy Independence Day, currently July 4th is Independence Day, but a day in the calendar year as an Energy Independence Day, and to say it started in Virginia, and maybe even some speeches by yourself on that topic, and maybe even some major, what will get the imagination fired up in the country, I believe, major movies or possibly the movies about it, but speeches of Energy Independence Day, and I know you from Evening Edition on WVTF.
And your name is Joe, right? I know this guy's voice from a radio show. I'd never met him before, but I recognize the voice. Joe often calls to talk to me about energy-related issues, and let me just talk about this one. Really interesting. My first year as governor, the legislature passed a bill asking me to do a statewide energy plan because Virginia never had an energy plan up to 2006. It just wasn't thought to be the burning issue. Now, I cannot go to a town hall meeting anywhere in the Commonwealth without getting huge and important questions about energy policy. Just within the space of 2 years, I think, the awareness of the war in Iraq, energy, the fact that we're purchasing so much energy from other nations, including nations that hate us, the costs of energy here, utility costs of gasoline, environmental issues, greenhouse gas. There's so many energy-related issues that are coming up now, and that's a good thing because we're wrestling with it in a way that we need to. Joe's point is an important one: energy independence. I often say that the state energy plan, what we do as a state and as a nation, there are 4 goals that we have to try to accomplish, and sometimes the goals are in conflict, and you just have to try to find the best balance you can. The first is we want energy that is relatively cheap and reliable to power our schools, our homes, our businesses. Virginia has been benefited in the past by having relatively low energy costs compared to other states. And we don't want to just suddenly have energy just skyrocket because it hurts consumers, especially people on fixed incomes and businesses. So the first policy is low cost and reliable. The second policy is clean. We know of the environmental consequences of the way energy is produced, and so we have to always look for better technology and better sources of energy so that we do not harm the environment and have clean energy. The third is energy independence, as Joe says. I do not believe that we can, as a nation, rely so heavily upon foreign sources of energy without doing huge damage to our security as a nation. And one of the questions that I'm getting at a lot of these town hall meetings deals with coal, for example, a coal-fired plant in Wise County that some are against. But what I've said is, look, we have to look for cleaner and cleaner coal technology and maybe have coal be a smaller portion of the pie. But coal is 48% of our energy right now. We can't take a native energy source like coal, say we're not going to use it, and then rely even more on foreign sources of energy. That's not a wise move for our country to make. The last goal is we got to promote conservation. Too many of us, and I'm guilty of this, do not take steps to conserve. You know, switching off the lights, doing things that are smart to conserve. It saves money if you do it, but it also has positive environmental consequences and can help us wean off our dependence on energy from other sources. So, Joe, what I decided when I got to be governor that in 2009, my legislative session in 2009 was going to heavily be focused on energy and environmental issues. Sort of 2006 was transportation, 2007 was healthcare, 2008 was education. Now, actually, transportation has been every year, unfortunately, but even transportation is heavily an energy issue. You know, what is the right thing to do for transportation? If you think about what the energy policy should be, they all fit together. And so we're going to be doing a lot on the energy issues going forward, and I'll look forward to talking to you on the radio. Okay? Yep. Let's see. How about other questions? So we're going to. Oh man, I'm going to get off easy. Oh, I got one over here. Okay. Mm-hmm. And here's a mic right to you, so everybody can hear.
Thank you very much. My name isn't Joe, my name is Eloise. But anyway, I do appreciate seeing what you have done and the accomplishments that you and the General Assembly have achieved in this past session. I have serious energy concerns. One, I live in a house that was built in 1782 over in Chatham. And so you spend a fortune restoring a house. What I would like to see is to look at here in the southern part of the state in particular, research on getting into the newest things in solar energy. We have beautiful sun much of the year, and we don't take advantage of that at all. And I would like to see us be able to do more, because I keep hearing of new things that you can do and that you might do with a historic structure. We've got lots of old houses and old buildings in Virginia, and we could be conserving a great deal of energy using some of the new technologies as I'm beginning to understand them. The other thing would be to look at the tides and the systems that generate energy without messing up the environment as far as the tides are concerned. And those are my big concerns.
Yeah, very good point, and a great segue from Joe's comment or follow-up. There is a lot of great research in alternative energy being done at our state's universities, but we need to push it even more. And solar energy research is being done. There's not a huge amount of solar energy research done at Virginia schools, because there are other states where the climate conditions are even better for solar research, but we can use the research and the technology to do more here. There is research being done on wind energy, the coastal energy, the movement of the tides. Old Dominion University in Norfolk is doing a lot of work on coastal energy tides. ODU is also doing a significant project to convert algae to biodiesel that can be used to operate vehicles and other and provide energy in other ways. And I've got the first little vial of algae biodiesel sitting in the on a bookshelf in my office, and that would be great, because algae is bad, and if you can find a good use for it that can have a positive result, that is a very positive thing. Here in Southside Virginia, there's some great agricultural opportunities for creating biodiesel from other agricultural products, or wood chips or biomass. And so those are some important things that we can do. So yeah, looking at alternative sources of energy throughout the Commonwealth. There's a great biodiesel company, I can't remember their name, but they're in a Danville company that's doing some very sophisticated research into the way to do biodiesel right on the farm, so that you don't have to make farmers drive huge distances to get to a refinery, but there can be more small-scale operations right on farms. It can be moved farm to farm to do biodiesel production right in the backyard, basically. So there is a lot more work that we can do in that area, and our universities are going to help us do that. Questions? Please, ma'am, in this third row, and then I'll come to the second row.
Yes, excuse me. I'm Joyce Sneed with Virginia Employment Commission.
Joyce, yeah.
Excuse me, I've had a cold.
Yeah.
I appreciate the fact that you're not going to close Martinsville office or the Danville office. Still am concerned about the level of funding.
Right.
and wondering if this administration is lobbying at the federal level to have the funds returned
Yes.
back to the 2005 level. And if so, what is being done?
You bet. And it's Joyce?
Joyce.
Joyce, we're doing a couple of things at the federal level. I have a Washington office. Virginia has a Washington office that works in liaison with our congressional delegation. And the guy that's the head of it, Alfonso Lopez, and his team have been working on this issue virtually since the day I came into office because Virginia is treated so poorly in these federal allocations. So they've been working together with DSR and others, and we have been working with our delegation. But the problem that we face, frankly, is that there aren't a lot of states that are getting less than 50 cents on the dollar. There were just a few states, and we were one of a few states that were getting treated pretty badly. We couldn't find enough allies to vote with us to change the allocation formula. But over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, that's kind of changed. More states are kind of like us. They're big donors, and they're not getting money back, and they're not happy with the allocation formula. We've got about 21 or 22 states now that are on our side, that are willing to work with us to try to change the allocation formula because it hurts them too. So our prospects are getting better on this every day. There are a couple of short-term things that they're doing in the Department of Labor in Washington as well that are hurting us. Some funds that they're holding back that they shouldn't, or requiring us to, they have this rescission policy where they kind of do a budgetary allocation to us, and about halfway through the year they say, well, we need to cut that allocation because of deficits in some other line items or accounts. So we are working on those issues with our delegation. Our delegation has been very supportive. What's eventually going to break this for us is that we're starting finally to get a critical mass of other states who are willing to join with us. And that is how we got to get the votes, to make something happen on this one in Washington. Mm-hmm. Please.
I'm Margaret Caldwell.
Margaret.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you. Thank you.
I am a former BEC employee, and I appreciate the fact, as Joyce Sneed said, that the BEC is not planning on closing the Martinsville and Danville offices. But I still have concern over what may happen after 6 months from now in terms of possible closings. I think one of the critical factors that needs to be considered is the educational level of this community. I understand the reasons for an across-the-board layoff done the way it was done, but you're familiar with your own figures about the fact that we have about a 63% rate of persons who do not have high school diplomas.
Right.
I know from working at the VEC that a higher percentage of of those people who come into our office filing for unemployment do not have computer skills at all.
Right.
They've never typed, much less use a computer.
Right.
And therefore, we can sit down, or we did, I did, those who are still there are continuing to do that, can sit down and attempt to train them in using the space bar and using a mouse and hitting tab and so forth to use the virtual one-stop system. That doesn't mean that after they sit there for 2 hours doing what should take 15 minutes, that they're going to continue to access the system because of their lack of computer knowledge and their frustration level. We also have people who come in, those who have especially been laid off from the factories, who do not read on a 6th grade level, and they need to do that at least to be able to be referred to the GED program. So we have a greater need for literacy training for those people. And the people I'm most concerned about are those in the, say, 45, 50, 55, 60-year range who still have several more years of work, who have very low self-esteem, who've done one thing all of their lives, who are not computer literate. And I am concerned that these people in our community are going to be lost in the shuffle, despite what other people say that there's nobody going to be left behind. But yet, when we have 8 fewer people serving in this VEC, and the stress level through the roof, frankly, for those who are still working at the VEC, and I can say that freely now because I'm not working there right now. But the stress level is astronomical, and these are caring people who are there because they love to help people. The wait, of course, is longer here as well as across the state for those seeking to be served. It may be that in Northern Virginia and Richmond that you have a higher level of education overall and computer literacy. But here, that is a crucial factor in terms of people being able to access the system for themselves or to receive assistance in accessing the system in terms of their new job search and in terms of filing for
Right.
and continuing their unemployment. That's my concern. These people in their 50s and 60s, especially in our community. And I feel that there has been, you know, the word that I heard from the VEC in Richmond was, well, these people are just going to have to learn to use a computer. And we can't hold their hand anymore. And frankly, that phrase to me lacks compassion. Yes, these people need to learn to use the computer, but there needs to be some kind of transition because the learning curve here in Martinsville and Henry County is very long. And so I just wanted to express my concern for these people to say this is the prime reason why this VEC in Danville and any of these in Southside should not be closed.
Right.
Not just the high unemployment rate, but the education.
I think that's a good
level.
point. That's a very good point.
Thank you.
And I think you make one very good point that it's important for us to reflect on, but you also raise an issue that I want to just go a little deeper into this with, which is how do we solve this financial problem we're in on the VEC funding? That is also a complicated question. The point that you make is if you just say it's just unemployment rate, you might miss factors like educational level that are very important. And that was why there was a bill this year that Delegate Danny Marshall had to make unemployment the sole criteria. We opposed that bill. And then, well, the governor's against, he doesn't want to help places that have high unemployment. And that wasn't the reason at all. It's just that there are some other factors that you have to weigh in. You might find an area that had higher unemployment, but an educational level of the individuals that was higher so that they might be able to help themselves a little easier than an area with lower unemployment but a low educational level. So you got to look at all of that. And that's why we were against just one factor. And that's one of the reasons, frankly, why in the announcements that we'll do, Danville and Martinsville are not going to be affected right now because we recognize that there are additional challenges that this region has because of the tradition of low percentages of higher ed attainment. Here is the challenge, though, that we're dealing with, and this is a very tough one, and it is kind of an issue of you got budgets on the one hand that are finite, and you have clear compassion and need issues that you're trying to match. We, like most states, have a system that's funded by these federal revenues. Could we put state money into the system? We could. We could put state money into the system. How would we come up with state money to add to the federal revenues? We would likely tax the employers more. But the first thing the employers would say is, we're only getting 27 cents back on the dollar that we're already paying. So it's not so fair to employers to tax them more when they already are paying taxes. They're just not getting the monies just aren't coming back to Virginia. So as we've wrestled with, well, as the dollars shrink, we either have to shrink offices or we have to tax employers more, and they're already being taxed and not getting the money for it. So that is the public policy dilemma that we've been in about this. It is never any fun to have to face issues of reducing any state agency. I mean, people are our strong point. And people who work in VEC offices have decided that they want to make their career helping others. And yet, this is just one of these situations where the significant, not to get on a political thing here, but these massive federal deficits, which are causing so many of these budgets to shrink, really put us in a tough spot. But I can assure you this, I can lobby at the federal level, I can do all kinds of things. At the end of the day, the amount of dollars that the feds give me is not under my control. But the way we use those dollars, we will certainly try to focus our energies and attention as much as we can on the parts of the state that have the most need, as measured by a number of different factors. There's no one factor, but we try to look in a comprehensive way about what need is and make our decisions based on that. Please. Yeah, Kim.
My name is Kim Atkins with the Workforce Investment Board office here. And on behalf of the board, I wanted to publicly thank you and your office for workforce development for all of your proactive efforts in working with us with the large percentage of dislocated workers that we had. We just recently were awarded close to $700,000 in additional funds from your rapid response.
Oh, good.
Pool.
Good.
So thank you for that.
I'm glad to know I awarded that money to you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to ask you about is your Executive Order 61 pertaining to workforce development system. And under the responsibilities of the Cabinet Secretaries, your Secretary of Trade is going to be working with your Chief Officer for Workforce Development,
Right.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Daniel LeBlanc and Pat.
And looking at co-location of the workforce career
Yes.
centers and the VECs to address the concerns regarding there's a large population, we could streamline our resources.
Right.
Co-location could mean the centers going to the VECs or the VECs going to
Right.
the centers, or if that's online. I wanted to get an understanding what your vision is for that
Yeah.
in the region.
Well, there's not necessarily a complete one-size-fits-all because different communities have services in different places. But the two people in my cabinet who've kind of been most involved in this, well, really there's three. Danny LeBlanc is the cabinet-level advisor for workforce development. Pat Gottschalk is the Secretary of Commerce and Trade. Tom Morris is the Secretary of Education. There are some others who are involved, but those are the main three. Danny has really been pushing this notion through the executive order of co-locating as many services as possible. And so if we can put the VEC in offices where DRS is doing workforce training with folks with disabilities, we can put community college workforce training programs. If we can co-locate, we try to do that as much as we can. And we've had some real success at doing some co-locations. And we've also done some ones that are going to be successful after people get used to not thinking just about their own turf, but, working across agencies. I mean, some of this takes a little bit of time. Change isn't always easy. But it is our intention to significantly promote co-location. I mentioned a minute ago, when we do the announcements on the VEC offices, there's going to be 2 closures. One closure is barely a closure because there's another facility very nearby where people will be able to be served. But then we're also going to do 2 co-locations where the office isn't closing, but it's going to move in with another agency where we think it'll save money, but it'll also do a better job because all the services will be right there. So as many opportunities as we can for co-location. And sometimes co-location issues depend upon, well, we've got a lease for the next 3 years, and we're going to have to pay the lease when we're there. Well, we'll stay here, but when the lease is up, then we'll co-locate in and look for opportunities there. So we're trying to manage it as we go. But we're going to do as much co-location as we can. We think that is cost effective, but it also contributes to kind of holistic services that are ultimately most effective for employers and employees. Please.
College system after about 30 years, and it's very interesting hearing comments because my father worked with Blue Ridge Tool and Die and was not a high school graduate, and this is basically a furniture table with desk, Stanley, cooker, and all that. And what I see, because I've actually done training for workforce development for about 20 years as a part of my job, it seems to me that these people who come to the VEC and cannot use computers really need to either have people there who could help them. I don't mean the VEC people, but perhaps people who are trainers, because I know that we've gone into various areas and we've done a lot of training on site at Reynolds for people who are out of work, and because we had so many layoffs here in the area. My mother is an 87-year-old retired nurse who lives in Bassett, and that's why I'm down here visiting. So it seems to me that there's hope for these people, but only if there are enough people who are willing to be available to teach them. So with Patrick Henry being here, perhaps additional people there on a part-time basis to help people learn to use computers, because it's obviously not something you can automatically.
Right. Well, I think this also touches upon a really big issue about education generally. I just, by lucky coincidence, I had a meeting earlier today with Margaret Spellings, who's the Federal Secretary of Education, who was in Richmond to talk about some educational policy issues. We were talking a little bit about education and just saying education is really going to be different, now going forward in a significant way. It's not something that you go to K-12, finish when you're 18, and then maybe you go to college, community college or college, and then you're done at age 22, and then you work the rest of your life. Education is going to increasingly be something that we do throughout our lives. We're going to be going back to community colleges to pick up a new credential or a new skill because technology is changing and other things are changing. So the notion that you finish school at 18 or finish at 22 or finish a graduate program in 25 and then you don't have to go back to school anymore, that probably is going to be a thing of the past. And that it's going to be continuous training and retraining. Now, some of the employees that you talk about who've been in a manufacturing environment where they haven't had to have a technological literacy, say, on computers, that's a huge jump for them to make at age 55 or 60. But it's somewhat similar to what we'll probably all have to be doing if getting retooled and retrained throughout the course of our lives. That means that, Barry, NCI, or the community college here, the students aren't just the 18 to 22-year-olds or the 20 to 24-year-olds. All of these schools will now have students sort of at all points in their life. Some will be there to get degrees. Some will be there just to get a skill or a credential. Some will be there to just pick up knowledge in an area. Maybe the credential isn't that important. They just want to pick up the knowledge to help them in their either enjoy life or in their working life. And so that means we have to plan very differently for the colleges and community colleges in the future because people will be using these institutions in a very different way than has been the case in the past. So there's a lot of transformation of these systems that we're going to need to do. I think higher ed, in terms of institutions in our country, may need to undergo dramatic transformation.